If you are applying for a green card in the US in 2026, the rules of your green card application has changed, and I'm going to be talking about one component of that change in this video, because a routine application is no longer enough to get your green card approved. Even if you have a clean case, no criminal history, your marriage is real, you meet all the requirements for a green card, an officer can still deny your green card based on negative equities. Now, not only do you have to meet the basic requirements for a green card, you also have to show that you deserve for that green card to be approved by demonstrating that you have unusual or even outstanding equities. In this video, I'll be breaking down what equities are and how you can document those equities for USCIS. In the eyes of USCIS, there's positive and negative equities. In this video, we're going to focus on the positive equities because that's what you want to show with your application. You want to address the negative equities, but the focus should be on all the positive equities you have. So what the heck is positive equities? Those are the things in your life that are so positive that it outweighs any negative factors in your life, like working without authorization or overstaying your visa. Under this new policy, even if you meet all the requirements for a green card and you have a clean record, you are still required to show why you should be allowed to apply for a green card in the US and not be required to consular process, which means applying for an immigrant visa outside of the US. To build a strong case, at least in my firm, we are focusing on four main pillars, four main categories of evidence. The first category is family and community ties. First one under that is your spouse, your family unity. So if you are married to a US citizen or permanent resident, you want to include evidence of that marriage and evidence of the relationship, showing that the relationship is genuine. Secondly, if it is a parent-child application, you also want to document the relationship between the parent and the child. If you have US citizen children or permanent resident children, you want to include documentation like birth certificates, school records, things like that, showing your children. But you also want to include evidence of the impact your children being in the US has in their lives. So for example, if they have any medical issues or if they are on any IEP or specialty programs in school, you want to document that because that is a way to show that impact that your presence or lack of presence in the US will have on your children. If you are the main caretaker for your children, for your parents, for your in-laws, like in the community that is your family, if you are the primary caretaker, you want to document that as well. Now, the last part on this family and community ties is your community involvement. How involved are you in your community? You can show your involvement by getting letters from people in your community. So for example, religious organizations. So if you go to church regularly, if you are active in different groups within your church, you can get letters from them. Nonprofits, if you volunteer on a regular basis with a specific nonprofit, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, the Boys and Girls Club, all those things, you want to document your involvement by having those organizations write letters of your positive attributes and positive impact in those groups. Basically, when it comes to community ties, you want to show that you are making a positive impact in your community and that impact is felt throughout your community, not just in your little niche, but that most people in your community see this. Like you are not just, going to work, coming home, but you are doing things in your community that shows your involvement and the value that you bring to that community. The second category is your length of residence and conduct, okay? The longer you have been in the US, the more you have to lose. Think about it this way. If you have been in the US for 20 years and have built a life here, you have a spouse, you have a house, you have a job, you've been paying into Social Security, you've been doing all these things as someone that has been living in the US for so long, if you are all of a sudden required to leave the US, that's going to have a lot of impact on you. So you want to document your presence in the US. You want to highlight how long you've been in the US, especially if you came here at a very young age. I am talking to my DACA recipients. If you came here at a very young age and now you are an adult applying for adjustment of status through a spouse, through a parent, and you can show your length of time in the US and you came at a very young age, leaving is not going to be as practical for you as someone that just came to the US a year or two ago. If you have maintained your status throughout your stay in the US, you came on an F1 visa, you maintained your F1 visa, then you went on OPT, then an employer filed an H1B for you, so now you are currently on H1B status. If you can show the progression of your compliance with US immigration laws, that would be very helpful to you. Another place you can do this is if you are a DACA recipient, because that shows, yes, you may have overstayed a visa or you entered without inspection, but once there was a pathway for you to get status, you followed that pathway. You renewed your DACA on time. You made sure to stay compliant with the rules of DACA. So that is positive things that you can show. Another positive is, let's say, for example, you did overstay your visa, but before your stay expired, you filed for an extension of your stay, right? Or you filed for adjustment of status because you got married and you decided to adjust your status in the US, or you are the parent of a US citizen and you decided to adjust your status in the US instead of leaving for whatever, legal reasons that you decided to do that. Those are things that you can show as a positive factor because you technically did not overstay. You are still in a period of authorized stay because you filed the adjustment of status before your current stay expired. Now, if you are in a situation where you did not file an extension of status and you overstayed your visa, and it's been 20 years and now you're filing for adjustment of status, I need you to focus on everything else, right? Focus on all the other equities, the community ties, the family, all of that, and not so much on your compliance. So I'm going to stop here to tell you, just because I have 4 categories and different things under each category does not mean that you are going to be able to document each of these categories. I need you to focus on the strong points, okay? That's what I'm doing for my clients. We are focusing on what is the strongest thing we can pull on here in order to show your positive equities. We do not want to overly focus on the negative equities, right? But we want to focus on the good things and mention the bad things and mention it in a way that we're saying, yes, I did this and it was bad. I overstayed my visa. However, look at my family ties. Look at my community involvement. Okay, so that's what you want to really focus on here. So yes, you may not have compliance history when it comes to US immigration laws. You may not have been in the US for so long, but those are options, okay? If you are getting value out of this video and you're thinking to yourself, how do I put this together? Like, how do I put together this evidence? Do I have enough here? Should I be getting more evidence? What do I need to do to show these positive equities? And you're not sure where to start? I want you to start with a consultation with me. You can go to my website, lilylegal.com/contact us, so that you can schedule a time with me and we can talk about what you could use as positive equities for your case. And then we can see if we can work together to put together a strong packet for you when it comes to this new requirement. The third category I have here is professional and financial contributions. This is where USCIS wants to see that you are making an economic impact into the country, right? You are an economic asset to the United States. You are not just taking, but you are putting back into the US. How do you show this? Employment history, right? You have been working. You have been paying your taxes, right? Those are things you can use to show this. So for tax compliance, show that you have been filing your taxes ever since you could, right? Whether you're filing your taxes with an ITIN or a social security number that you were issued a long time ago, but you have been filing your taxes consistently and paying taxes to the US government. If you have been with the same employer for several years, you can put in your pay stubs, your W-2s to show your stable employment. And you can also reach out to your employer to write you a statement about how you are as an employee. So think about it this way. If you get performance reviews and those reviews are always positive about the impact that you're making for this employer, and you are following the rules and doing the things that they expect you to do, and even going above and beyond in that job, please talk to them about writing you basically a performance review of you as an employee, and including that, because your impact on that employer is an economic impact, right? If you are, going above and beyond in your job, your employer is not going to want to get rid of you. They want to keep you. So they may be more willing to write that statement for you. And that gives, again, the professional and financial contribution part of it. Next, property and business ownership. So if you own property in the US, you want to document that. If you own a business in the US, you want to document that. Listen, if you own a business that employs other people, you definitely want to document that, right? You want to document that you not only are employing yourself in the business, right? You are the business owner, but that you have employees that rely on you continuing to build this business, continuing to work in this business in order for them to have their incomes, right? There are people, US citizens, permanent residents, relying on you to be in the US, to continue running this business, for them to continue getting a financial benefit from the business, which is their income. You want to document that as well. Now, for property, you want to document, your property taxes. If you have a mortgage, you definitely want to document that, because if you have a mortgage obligation, you live in the US is not really going to help that mortgage company, because now their mortgage is going to default and they're not going to get paid, right? So you want to really think about what are the obligations you have that you are currently paying for. So car, right? If you're leasing a car, if you have a car note, you want to document that as well, because those are financial obligations and ownerships that you have that you need to consistently keep up with. Now, if you are behind on your mortgage, if you are behind on paying your car note, you may not want to include that, because we want positive equities, not negative equities, right? So let's make sure that whatever we're including is showing the positive things that we're doing. Okay? Okay. And then the final category, the fourth category, is the humanitarian and hardship factors. In this category, you want to show how your absence from the US is going to cause extreme hardship to your spouse, your parent, your children, whoever it is that you support and that relies on you. You want to document how your absence from the US will cause them extreme hardship. Now, when we talk about extreme hardship, we're going to be talking about it very similar to if you are doing a 601A or a 601 waiver hardship. You want to look at financial hardship, you want to look at medical hardship, and you want to look at country conditions as well, because all of that together can lead to hardships. So let's give a hypothetical, right? Your spouse has a medical condition that is very devastating. They're not able to work because of that medical condition, and they are on your medical insurance that you get through your job. Okay, you're following me here? That's medical hardship because they have a medical condition, right? That is devastating. That's financial hardship because they rely on you to provide for their home because they're not working. They're relying on you for their medical insurance so that they don't have to pay out of pocket for things that are going to cost a lot of money. Because when you have a devastating medical condition, most of the time you are paying a lot out of pocket if you do not have insurance. Even if you have insurance, you still may be paying a lot. So you want to document that. So we have a medical condition, we have a financial hardship, and then let's bring in the country conditions. Now, if that spouse that has the medical condition that relies on your insurance now has to leave the US with you to go to your country, and you can show that your country's medical facilities are not good enough to help with her medical conditions, right? You have to pay for out of pocket for everything. There's no insurance. The place that you could live when you go to that country does not even have a medical facility close by. Maybe the closest one is 2 or 3 hours away that can handle her medical condition or his medical condition. You want to document all of that. So that's why I say when it comes to extreme hardship, it's really looking at the full picture of the hardship, the medical, the financial, the country conditions, the psychological hardships of it all. You want to document that, okay? So how do you document financial hardship? You want to get financial statements, right? Income statements, bank statements, tax returns. Those are things that show the financials. Then for medical hardship, you want to show medical statements, a letter from the doctor, the treating physician detailing the serious health conditions that would worsen if you two were separated, or if the patient had to leave the US with you to go to a country that may have substandard medical facilities. Okay? And then finally, country conditions. You want to provide evidence that that country that you may be going to is less safe and has less of a system, medical system, financial system that can support you and your household. Those are the things you want to document when it comes to country conditions. A good way to document the financials with the country conditions is looking at doing a financial statement for the family, like how much income do you have every single month for each person, and then how much expenses do you have each month for each person. And if the immigrants, right, the person applying for the green card was forced to leave the US, what would that do to the finances of the family? You want to look at it both ways because it will show, okay, if the immigrant is making $6,000 a month and the non-immigrant is making $2,000 a month and your rent is $2,000 a month, what about food, insurance, everything else? So it's really important to document all those positive things, positive equities. Okay, now let's talk about some strategy here. How can you put all of this together? Because it's not just filling out the forms and including like the basic documentation. Now you have to actually prove the equities. And there's ways to do this. You can include all those documentation, right? You should include all the documentation in those 4 categories if possible. Right? If you are not strong on one category, beef up the other categories like we talked about. Now, the discretionary statement is where you put it all together. The discretionary statement is basically where you put together everything. Like we talked about the 4 categories, you're putting it together in a statement for the officer to look at and decide, yes, there is positive equities here. Yes, I do understand and see how the medical hardship fits in with the financial and sees the community ties, the family ties. You basically put in all of those things together, and you'll be arguing in that statement about how your positive equities overcomes the negative equities, okay? The negative things are the overstay, the working without authorization, etc., etc. You want to show that your positive equities are more than that. And in that statement, you want to cover the 4 questions that USCIS is going to ask you at your interview, okay? There's 4 specific questions that they have been asking consistently since May 21st, and you want to address that in your statement as well. The first one being, why did you choose adjustment of status, filing for green card in the US versus consular processing, applying at an embassy? Okay. Why did you not leave the US when your period of stay expired? So you had a B1, B2 visa for 6 months, you overstayed that visa. Why didn't you leave before the 6 months? They want you to address that. Do you have any family or community ties in the US? You want to address that. Okay, so you want to make sure that your statement is addressing all of those questions so that when you do put together the evidence behind it, it's going to make it a strong statement, a strong packet. I am going to do a more detailed video on the discretionary statement and preparing for the interview with the new updates, but I just want to touch on the fact that you do need that discretionary statement, and you should be working with your attorney to put that together. And then finally, you need to prepare for the interview to know how to answer these questions. Have a reasonable answer to these questions, a credible answer to these questions, and saying, oh, my attorney told me that I could apply for adjustment of status is not a good enough answer. Saying that, oh, adjustment of status just seemed easier is not a good enough answer. Okay, so in case that's what you're thinking, it's not a good enough answer. So make sure you're working with your attorney to talk through these questions and understand where the question is coming from, why the office is going to be asking those questions, why you need to address it in your statement before you even file anything. Okay, now remember, although the new policy is stricter than before, right, adjustment of status is still a legal pathway for you to gain residency in the US and eventually a green card. It is just going to require you to do more work to prove to an officer that they should exercise positive discretion and that your positive equities outweighs the negative equities, which by now you should know what positive equities are versus negative equities. And if you don't, let me know in the comments and I will explain it again. But you want to show the officer all your positive equities while addressing the negative equities in your statement. In my office, just because of the way this has just come out, we are reevaluating how we handle adjustment of status applications, reevaluating the cases that we currently have pending to figure out the best way to build a robust evidence packet for our clients before it becomes an issue for them, right? Before their interview, before a decision is made, we want to have all those things covered and making sure that we are addressing it in their mock interviews as well. It is important to note that if you're thinking about leaving the US because of this policy, you may want to talk to an immigration lawyer first, especially if you have overstayed your visa for more than 6 months, right? If you are still under 6 months, consular processing may still be an option for you in the short term. Whereas if you have overstayed your visa for 6 months or more, you're maybe looking at a 3-year or a 10-year bar. So you want to consult with an immigration attorney like myself before you make that decision. And if you would like to meet with me to talk about the factors that you need to consider when making that decision, please feel free to go to my website, lilylegal.com, click on contact us, and you can pick a date and time that works best for you for us to talk about your situation and figure out the best options available to you.